welcome to Downbelow RPG. We are discussing the aforementioned RPG, which we are creating. It is a game about dystopia, cyberpunk. Well, basically it's a game about disempowerment, and that's what I want to ask my co-creator here about today. I'm Ian.
I'm Steve.
Steve, we have been talking about this game for a few months now, and one of the themes that keeps coming up is the characters, not necessarily the players or GM, but the characters are heavily disempowered.
Right.
And I want you to talk about why is that? Why the disempowerment angle?
There's a couple of reasons. I'm actually going to cover the simplest one up front. Originally, the characters were not actually supposed to be as disempowered as they have become. Mm-hmm. Some of that is actually in meta response to the system, because the system explicitly empowers players and DMs. It empowers the players to decide when they succeed and fail and what they use to succeed and fail with. It empowers the DM to not worry about numerical values like challenge rating and hit points, but instead simply to focus on story and appropriateness. So since it's very empowering to maintain the feel that we were going for, it actually became not necessarily necessary, but prudent to disempower the characters further to make up for the power level that the players have. So this is actually a little bit of growing pains. We're still in development. It wasn't originally supposed to start off this way, and it might end up going back up to scale after playtesting. That's the first, simplest answer. There's a longer answer, and so buckle up. The longer answer is basically what I like to refer to as the spectrum of the contrast of cool. Different players and different GMs, and I'm going to focus on the GMs and the settings for a moment, have different preferences for contrasts. Some people like to saturate the setting in awesome. This has a very strong place. I would not want to play a four-color superhero world that was not saturated in awesome stuff. You can't do it. You need your ridiculously labeled bat computers. You need your invisible flying jet. You need your super basket weaving power. Okay, maybe not going that far. But you need your Kryptonian know-how and technology. You need to be saturated in superheroics. You need to be swimming in cool. Similarly, if we're playing space fantasy or space opera, I want a very high saturation of let's be cool, let's be awesome, let's be enviable.
So that's the opposite end of the spectrum from where we are. That's the total empowerment.
So with total empowerment, there's no contrast between what's cool and what isn't. All the challenges totally rise to the cool, rise to the empowerment, and this is the classic Superman problem. How does a writer write something that challenges Superman? Because he can punch through the planet and isn't hurt by anything that's not kryptonite in the Golden Age. And so they had to develop equal challenges to rise to that. This spectrum is at the far end of that, which is coolness by contrast, which is basically a philosophy that says the coolest cool is the cool that you've fought for the hardest. And so that's where this is, by approaching it from a disempowerment angle. And again, I don't mean the players, I don't mean the GMs, I specifically mean the characters. By making them have to fight for the awesome stuff, that makes the awesome stuff better. Straight up better than if they had just fallen in their lap, or if they had just saved up the money and purchased it, or what have you.
Sort of hunger is the best spice.
Exactly. The same thing that you see this all the time. You see this in real life and in other role-playing games. In a traditional fantasy role-playing game, the first time someone finds a magic sword is fantastic. The 72nd magic sword they find goes on the pile, let's sell it to the usual merchant, we've got better by now. In real life, the first mythic rare you pull out of a Magic the Gathering pack is the most exciting thing ever. I can't believe I just got that. And then when you're on your fourth box that you're opening up, oh, I got 5 mythics out of this box. How much are they worth? The more you're saturated with good things, the more they start to lose some of their spice.
And so this wraps back around to that initial answer you gave.
Yep.
That's why it mattered that the development process had us ending up empowering the actual players and GMs so much that we needed to turn the knob on the setting side.
And another thing that I want to talk about is it's very easy with modern games especially to focus on the player-DM equation and to empower or disempower one side or the other. And usually when you empower one, you disempower the other. If you empower the players, you usually disempower the DM and vice versa. We wanted to avoid that. We wanted to make certain that both sides were empowered, if not equally, at least in relative equivalence to each other. But in that equation, by empowering people, something had to give, and that something was the character's situation.
And one thing we ended up doing that still touches on setting is we disempowered both players and GM. We've been telling people explicitly, you should not let the status quo change, because the fact that there are these monolithic aspects of the world that the characters you're focusing on can't change by themselves, and that can't change in the scope of the kind of stories that you want to be telling in this game, that is core to the genre, that's core to the setting.
And similarly, this is not us specifically saying you can't do that. This is us saying that, unlike other games, in a traditional fantasy dungeon crawling game, if you change the status quo, if your adventurers move from adventurers to landowners, if the benevolent kingdom is taken over by an evil empire or vice versa, you haven't changed the core activity of the game. You haven't actually changed the face of the game that much. However, here, if you change the status quo, you're departing radically from the face of the game. There are no small changes to the status quo. So it should be big. It should be the hardest fought kind of cool.
So we'll talk more about things that are or aren't changes later, and we'll probably touch again tomorrow on ways that we are empowering and disempowering the players, or in a later segment. But for now, if you have something you'd like to hear about from us about the system or the setting, ask it in the comments, support us on Patreon, and get access to the rules and all our new updates. And if you have watched and liked this, we thank you.
And please share it with your friends.
We will see you again tomorrow.